Hello, everybody. Welcome to our podcast of The Uncle and the Carbuncle. We will take you from Dixie Walker to Dixie Cups. Thanks for tuning in. Okay, we've got a couple of things we're going to discuss today. My partner Christian and I were discussing some of the best hitters and some of the best pitchers of all time. I have an advantage in that I've been watching and listening and reading about baseball since the 50s. So I do have that perspective. But Christian eats, drinks, and sleeps baseball. So he has some thoughts on the subject as well. So we're going to talk about the best. First, we're going to talk about the best hitter of all time, hitters of all time. And we broke it up into after World War II. Now we know there are some guys like DiMaggio and Ted Williams who started before World War II and finished after World War II. Most of Williams's career was after World War II, so they would be eligible. So without further ado, I'm going to turn it over to Christian, and he's going to tell you who he thinks is the best hitter of all time. Chris.
Now, for my pick for the best hitter of all time, this was a tough choice for me. So, I've never actually seen any of these guys play, being that I'm a young kid, I'm only 15. So, I really have a disadvantage in that aspect. But Ted Williams has batted 400 multiple seasons, but I gotta go with Ken Griffey Jr. His swing is the nicest swing I've ever seen. I've seen highlights of him playing, although I haven't really seen him in person, so like I mentioned before, that's a disadvantage. But he has a sweet swing. He hits homers. He hits for contact and power. He's not the fastest guy, so he's not going to get the most doubles and triples, but he has some speed. He has above average speed. So because of those reasons, I think it would have to be Ken Griffey Jr. And he's just watching him play the game, watching him at the plate. His approach is second to none, and it's just so entertaining watching him in the box.
Hmm. Yeah, that's Griffey Jr. You hit the nail on the head when you said he's got such a sweet swing. He did have a sweet swing. It was a pleasure to watch hit. And this is very difficult. I mean, Ted Williams was a great hitter. He wasn't a good hitter. He was a great hitter, and there are a lot of people who would tell you he was the best hitter that ever lived. Um, and I couldn't argue against that. What I would say is, if we're just looking at a pure hitter, and we're talking about after World War II, so we don't have Babe Ruth or Lou Gehrig involved in this or any of those other hitters from the 20s and 30s. Um, I would have to say that, in my opinion, Ted Williams is probably the best pure hitter, period. If all we're talking about is hitting. Now, if we're talking about the best all around ball player, including hitting, then I'd have to, and it hurts me to say this because I bleed blue, but Willie Mays was the best all around player I ever saw. He was a tremendous hitter. He hit home runs, he hit 660 home runs. He hit for average. He stole bases. He was a great defensive outfielder. I mean, he made that very famous catch in the World Series against Cleveland, and the best part of that catch was then he made the throw back to the infield. But he made better catches than that against the Dodgers. I would see him all the time. The guy was amazing. He also had a unique ability when he was scoring a run. He would slow up about a third of the way to the plate and try to draw a throw, knowing that he could still make it, but one of the other base runners could move up a base. He was a tremendous baseball smarts. He played forever. He was just a great all-around player. But I don't think he was the pure hitter that Williams was. Now remember, Williams, what did he hit? 521 home runs, but he missed 5 seasons, almost 5 full seasons in his prime because he sat out for World War II and for the Korean War. He was a fighter pilot in both wars. So if you throw those 5 seasons in there, you probably got close to 700 home runs instead of 521. So Ted Williams would be my pick for best hitter. Now we're going to go into another category, and I know we're not going to agree on this. So we're going to go into best pitcher. Best pitcher of all time since World War II. Christian.
My pick for this is Tom Seaver. Now, am I a little biased on that because I'm a Mets fan? Sure,
Yes.
yes, possibly. But I kind of view Seaver as an old version of Clayton Kershaw. They both have very similar pitch types, both roll around the same speed, work hitters the same way. Both are just both outstanding, but forget about Kershaw. He's not in this conversation yet.
Hmm.
But Seaver, his career, his stat line, you just don't see that in many people. He, well, I don't. He's never won a World Series, if I'm correct, because he was on the Mets, and Mets don't win World
He
Series
won the
that much.
'69 World Series with the
Oh well, he has won a World Series,
Mets.
but it, that doesn't really matter when you're talking about best pitcher, because best pitcher, one great pitcher isn't going to make or break a team. It helps. It certainly helps, but it's not. As you could see with the Mets, they have Jacob DeGrom, but they're not a World Series team. They're not even in the playoffs this year. So my pick for this would be Tom Seaver, just on the way, just on his approach on the mound. Really, he just carves up batters left and right.
Mm. Yeah, thanks, Chris. Seaver was a great pitcher. I don't know if you know this, but the way the Mets got him, there was some controversy. I think he had signed with the Dodgers before, but they didn't have rights to him, and there was something with Atlanta, and the commissioner put all three teams, the Mets, the Dodgers, and the Braves, in a hat and picked that one out. And it turns out he picked out the Mets, and that's how the Mets got the best pitcher they ever had. Um, I always thought you compared Seaver to Kershaw. I always thought Seaver was more of a power pitcher for most of his career. He could rear back and throw, and he would get his knee dirty because he followed through all the way. Um, and Kershaw was a power pitcher too, especially his first 7 or 8 years. But I think I always thought that Seaver was a better power pitcher than Kershaw was. But they're similar in their repertoire. I would agree with that. In terms of best pitcher, this is a great question, man. Because if I was just picking a pitcher for a short period of time, the best pitcher I ever saw was Sandy Koufax. Um, and for a 6 year period, I would put his numbers versus the league up against anybody else. He was outstanding, um, dominant, won the pitcher's triple crown, I think 3 years in a row. ERA, strikeouts, and wins, and won the ERA title, I think 5 years in a row in the National League. Won the Cy Young Award 3 times when they only gave out one Cy Young for all of baseball. When he retired, they started giving out two. That's how good he was. Um, but if I had a pitcher, I would be torn between two pitchers. But I think, because I loved Warren Spahn, a lefty pitch for Milwaukee and Atlanta Braves, he was just so good for so long. And he would pitch. I remember one time he lost the game to Juan Marichal in 16 innings, 1-0. They both pitched the whole game. Um, but if the more I think about this, the more I think that Pedro Martinez may have been the best pitcher over a career, over a long career. Because if you look at Pedro's numbers versus the rest of the league, I think his separation was the greatest. He was just so dominant for so long, and it's just amazing to me that he came from the Dodger system where they know pitching, and they traded him to the Expos. It's just I think that was in the Delano DeShields deal. I think, and that's amazing to me because they could have had him all those years. Um, but in any event, so if I had to pitch a career, I think for an entire body of work, I'd pick Martinez, and for a short span, he only had a 10-year career, of which 6 were unbelievable years. I'd have to pick Sandy. Koufax was a bonus baby, and in those days the rules were if you signed for over, I think it was $5,000 at the time, you had to be on the major league roster. You couldn't play in the minor leagues. So he was 18 years old on the Dodger roster in 1955. Now think about that. That's a team with Duke Snyder and Gil Hodges and Roy Campanella and Jackie Robinson and Don Newcomb and Carl Erskine. And these were great all-star players, seasoned vets, and Koufax was on that team. And Koufax never got the minor league time he needed to refine his craft. He was wild, but he could throw a ball through a brick wall, and it took him 5 years to get it together. He would show some flashes of brilliance in the '59 World Series. I know he lost the game 1-0 to Chicago. And he struck out 18 in one game. So he would show flashes of it, but not the consistency that he did from 61 through 66. And his last year, he won 27 games. It was the best year he had, and he had to retire because of shoulder problems. So for a short period of time, Sandy was dandy, but for a career, I would say Pedro Martinez. You have anything else to add?
No, I think we pretty much covered it all.
All right, folks, that's the Uncle and the Carbuncle. You can reach us, spell it out, Uncle and Carbuncle, Carbuncle, at gmail.com. Thanks for listening.